Welcome to the Beyond Pain podcast with your hosts, Joe Gambino and Joe LaVacca. Join the two Joes, two physical therapists, as they discuss how to navigate the uncertainties of pain so you can move beyond it and get back to the activities you love most. This podcast is for Joe, and their guests to share their clinical thoughts and ideas based on their collective clinical experiences. Can this information be for you? Maybe, but we cannot know for sure. Therefore, it is always worth talking to your healthcare provider to make the best decisions in your care before you implement anything on this podcast. And please use common sense.
Welcome back to the Beyond Pain podcast. I am one of your hosts, Joe Gambino. I'm here with the other beautiful Joe LaVacca over there. You can find us on Instagram at Joe Gambino DPT for myself, at Strength and Motion _PT for him. Podcast is on Instagram, Beyond Pain Podcast. And if you do want to see Joe's beautiful face on YouTube, you can as well. Cups of Joe _PT over there. Welcome back to the show.
Good to be back. Give me another week and I'll have a little bit more of a base tan for people checking us out on YouTube. Yeah, still in Hilton Head. I love when we do double episodes. I get to spend more time with you.
Yes.
I'm going to try to get a little sunlight on my face today, tomorrow, as long as Courtney will let me, because she's technically working. And I am working today, but I am not working tomorrow like she is. So I've already said I will not be a prisoner here, but we'll see how that goes for me, Joe.
Very nice. Very nice. Just use the bike as the excuse to get out. Like, hey, listen, you don't have a bike for me. I'm out of here. I'm not wanted.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. I know where I stand.
My base tan is starting to come in from all the other mulching I had to do last week. So we got the little farmer's tan going. We're getting there. We're getting there.
Tis the season. Tis the season.
All the yard work and golf will help with that. But I do have another question of the day for you, Joe.
I know. I'm excited about this one because you said it was tough.
Yes. Prompted by a client discussion here. The question for you is how, we may have even talked about this before, but how do you navigate scenarios? You can pick, there's like a goosebumps, like pick your own, journey here.
Books. Those are fun.
Yes. How do you handle conversations where, one, the frustration around recovery is very high and discouraging, but also that being paired with the expectations that pain-free is like the only option and that rehab should be linear in nature and not this like up and down. So I actually have a couple people right now that have difficulties with that. And that's like where a lot of our education goes. So pick where the direction you want to go in. And there's a lot of thoughts there. This is like a 25-hour episode, but if there's a listener right now who is thinking some of these things, what is the bullet points that they should be taken home here?
Yeah, I have them too. And I think every healthcare professional has this. And I think every client has felt this. Frustration, to me, the actual important thing first is defining it. And I think you sort of did a good job hinting at expectations, right? So frustration typically is the feeling you have when your process does not lead you to the results that you were expecting. And this is a good segue for us because we just kind of left last episode talking about process-based therapy or outcome-based therapy. When you are outcome focused, it's always yes, no, right? Like, I want to be pain-free. Okay. Well, when do you want to be pain-free? We'll just kind of like play this game, right? If it's not a reasonable expectation in terms of I want to be pain-free today or tomorrow or 4 weeks from now, right then and there, you're going to be frustrated because your process is incorrect. So do I believe that you can get to pain-free? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there's certain people who can absolutely get there. There are certain things that work for individuals, and there are some things that don't work for anyone. And I don't know where you're going to fall in that realm. I can flag you or screen you for certain things and say, okay, maybe you have a slight predisposition to have more chronic pain if you're doing things like calling out of work or missing social engagements, like you are catastrophizing or really worried about your pain. If you report your pain as a 10 out of 10, like at really early on the onset, these are some flags for me that might push you in a direction. But if I'm hearing those things and then I hear that you want to be pain-free in 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, I'm going to identify that as a potential mismatch of expectations. And I'll typically just use school as an example because like school is like a very finite September to June. right? And when you and I were going through school, or our clients were going through school, I wanted to be in second grade when I was in first grade. But the
Mhm.
only way I can get there was by going through an entire year of school, graduating first grade, and then I was allowed to get the second. There
Mhm.
was no goosebump shortcut. There
Sure.
wasn't like, hey, if you wanted to be in second grade sooner, you're going to take this accelerated path to second grade. And we were accepting of that all the way through high school, all the way through college, and even through your advanced degrees if you got there. So you are very familiar with the process of what you have to go through to achieve a
Mhm.
goal. Somewhere along the lines, we were sold, or our clients were sold, this idea that PT or rehab lasts for 6 to 8 week increments.
Mhm.
What have you ever been able to accomplish and maintain over the course of 6 to 8 weeks? Probably not a lot. So, 6 to 8 weeks starts your journey. This is where we lay down the foundational framework to carry you through the next year, to carry you through the next phase, to carry you through maybe even the rest of your life. Because we joked last week, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell,
Mhm.
right? I learned that in school and I carry that with me. So I need to be able to teach people the proper coping strategies and expectations. So, yes, they can still feel a little bit frustrated, but I think frustration is what's going to push you to try to work a little bit harder.
Mhm.
Frustration is going to try to push you to reflect on, were you staying true to the process, or were you cutting corners? Were you really
Mhm.
doing these things 2 or 3 times a week? Were you really giving them your full attention? Were you doing them, while you're trying to take care of your kids, while you're doing laundry, while you're doing this, while you're doing that? And you're just kind of pulled in so many different directions.
Mhm.
Again, what sort of thing would be accomplished as you're multitasking a million different things? Probably not much.
Mhm.
So I welcome the frustration. I do tell people it is normal, but
Mhm.
I also think that it often is felt just because they have an incorrect expectation of what I can do for them, of what they can do for themselves, and how long it might take to get there. And oftentimes, when I sit down with people and they're like, well, you're the first person that said this to me. A lot of people have been like, well, you're not better in 2 visits or 3 visits or 4 visits, then I can't help you. And I think that's the biggest crock of shit that I've ever heard from healthcare professionals. Like, I don't know where people started this idea thinking that their technique or their formulas or their hands were, the power of the almighty universe. But there's nothing in anything I've read for me to think that, hey, if you're not better in 2 visits, you failed therapy, or I failed you, or you're not fit for my practice. And I think that's where so many people end up in this void of, well, I've tried PT. Well, no, you tried 2 sessions of manual therapy with a guy with a God complex and you didn't feel better. So that's not trying physical therapy. Oh, and then there's the same thing with chiropractic and massage and maybe even training. Oh, I tried training. How long did you give it? I trained, twice a week or 3 times a week for a month or two, and I didn't see the results that I was looking for. Yeah, I wouldn't expect you to, and that is really eye opening for people to hear. When my expectations are, this is not a quick fix. This is going to be a process. This will be a journey. But I always say this, dude, I will be there for you in that journey as long as you want me to be there. And as long as you allow me the opportunity to stay by your side. Am I foolish to think that I'm your end point? No. I've had a couple people just in the last couple months where we've sat down and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, yeah, I think I'm going to stop. And I was like, this is not surprising to me, given our previous conversations, given what I'm seeing you doing on the app, given, the back and forth and the notes that you're leaving me. But where can I direct you next is my next question, right? Because there is a next step for you. Maybe it's not me. Maybe it's Mr. Joe Gambino. Maybe it's the PT practice down the street, which for me is always, Perfect Stride. I'll refer most people to Perfect Stride just because I have a good relationship with them. I know that they're close by. If you can come see me at 20th and 5th and we're not working out, then I know you can get to 14th and 6th, right? You're like only a couple blocks away. So I think being accepting that frustration is normal. I want you to have it. But I don't want us to just think about a magic button and hitting it to get rid of it, because that's not going to serve us. But we can turn down the dial and have frustration be a 4 out of 10 instead of a 10 out of 10. And that can be a little bit more motivating to kind of keep people moving, forward, or keeping with the process, or sticking with the process. And I think maybe even breaking it down into smaller goals. right, is also very, very helpful. So you can still keep your outcome of pain-free, but what's the first step in knowing we're working towards that? Like, what can't you do right now? And you mentioned, in the podcast before, and as it usually comes up, playing with my kids. Maybe it's doing gardening or mulching work, right? I have this like pile of shit I need to get done in my house, and I just can't do it because I'm in too much pain or I can't be there for my kid. Okay, great. So we know that we have a process then of making you feel like yourself that includes lifting something from the floor or shoveling or repeated motions of flexion extension. Why don't we just work on that? Why don't we just work on that for a few weeks and see if we can get you more tolerant of the things that you want to do, thinking that you have to be pain-free to do them. So I think that that's where I would start that journey. Like I said, there's probably a lot to dissect there with the question and the topic being so broad. And I don't want to rush through all of it, but does that serve as a reasonable, like, kind of entry point into this conversation for us?
Yeah, I do believe so. I think a part of it is, the mismatch of expectations. Like part of my process was asking like, well, what are you expecting? And that's how I learned like one of them wants to be, the goal is to be like 100% pain free. And when he does everything, probably does a little bit more, right? Like he's done, like we've been working together for a while. He's had some major, like just had a kid. He just came off of like being like deathly ill, like I don't know if it was COVID or whatever it was, but like in bed like for 2 weeks, kind of sick. Like so like major stressors, right, to his life, to his body that have coincided with his flare ups, right? So it's and then plus with like the expectation of like wanting to be pain free and like we've gotten to him to a point where like he was doing pretty well. Like we were in the gym, he was working out, he still had some pain, but it didn't get to a point where it was like crushing him. But like right now with like the lack of sleep and all the stress that's been going on, it's like he's like very irritated, like almost like where we started. So it was kind of like reframing expectation. I was like, well, what? And I've had this conversation with someone who I just started working with, like in our like initial conversation, and with him when I asked these questions, like, well, what is the acceptable outcome here? Like, what if we have like a range of outcomes? Like, pain free could be one of those like ranges, like outcomes here. But what happens if it's not the outcome? Like, what are you okay with? And both of them were like, well, I don't really want to have my mind think that way. And so that's like I like reframe it like, well, like we need to be aware of all these possible outcomes that can happen because that's what's going to allow you to not feel the frustration. And like, what if this is this is like the best that you can get based on like your long history of pain and your genetics and like all these other factors. And it doesn't matter if you do surgeries or cortisone shots or like whatever you try, like that, this is the best outcome. And like we need to be aware of this and okay of this. And like the conversation in like a very positive direction where like we were able to define it and like put like a
Mhm.
time frame ish on it, right? Like so we could start to like move the gap and like get and move towards that direction, right? So I think that that's a really, really, really big part of anyone who really struggles. And like, yeah, there's a lot of people I talk to who are like, yeah, I do everything. And I talk to them and they have been doing everything, and whatever that part of the
Mhm.
journey is wasn't for them. And it could just be a mismatch in provider. It could just be the things that you were doing were not like the things that like the match of like your goals and what you want to do and the level of exercise you're getting. It might not have just been like the right things for you at that time. And, you need to find another approach. So hopefully this urges people to like consider like, the ranges of outcomes. What are you okay with at the minimum? What is like the perfect scenario? And if you fall somewhere in between, will you be happy and live the life that you want to live? And I think if you can wrap your head around that and expect that and understand that like flare ups are going to happen, and it's not going to be this like perfect journey, I think it makes it easier to go through that process. And obviously, you mentioned earlier that there's going to be some people that, for whatever reason, we may never figure it out, whether it's like autoimmune or like a high
Mhm.
inflammation response or just a little, just like a, pain response. Like there's no real reason why your pain system is more sensitive than others, where the struggle is going to be real for you for almost ever, right? But how do we start to make it more manageable where you can do more, even with that same level of discomfort, so to speak? So I'll leave it there.
Right, and it's like, and that is just like height, right?
Mhm.
Like there are certain things that we can control and there's certain things that we can't, no matter what we try to do. I can work out and train every day of my life. I am going to be 5'10" and a half, I'm thinking, for the
Mhm.
rest of it. I might even shrink, even though I work so hard.
Mhm.
So if I can't control my height, and that's a variable. Can we control your pain response, your nervous system response? Like you said, we're learning a lot about immune system. We're learning a lot about genetic markers. Could you have just been predisposed to
Mhm.
having this? And if that's the case, then yeah, you're beautifully saying, well, what if this is your life? How do we find a way for you to make this life work?
Mhm.
What has been other times when things haven't worked out for you? How did you respond then?
Yeah.
Because if you're responding the same way towards them, then this is more of a trait thing. Like this isn't
Mhm.
like a pain thing. This is something maybe you want to work on with therapy. This is
Mhm.
maybe something that you want to work on with another, like you mentioned, provider. Because if you've always not coped well when outcomes didn't go your way, then this is going to be the same thing. And where did that start? Like
Mm.
kids behave that way all the time, right?
Right.
And I can hear your beautiful babies right now. Like one's not getting his way. One's not getting his way and he's not happy about it, right? And that's exactly the response. But over time, Joey's going to know, oh, hey, I know how to deal with this now. Because if I go to my boss and I ask him for a promotion and he or she says no, I can't just start crying in the middle of the office until they give me a promotion, right? I have to figure out what is going to work for me and what's a coping strategy for me. And it's the same thing with our clients with pain, right? But I think a lot of people have the tools. They just don't recognize using them for different situations because why would I treat my pain the same way as I treated not getting a promotion? Well, because there probably were a lot of similar behaviors that you had, and maybe some of them are good, some of them are bad, or maybe you just weren't tapping into them at all and you were just, sort of pouting, and that's okay. But then it's not serving you anymore. So we need to give you something.
Yeah, I like that. I think the big thing, the way I think of it, right, is like having these expectations will allow you to continue to go on when the going gets tough and not stop or change or give up altogether, right? Which is like the things that we want to avoid, right? Because I think a lot of people end up on the right path, and because of the frustration or the difficulties, it becomes hard for them to continue moving forward. Right. And then like, oh, I need to change this and change that and do all this other stuff. And sometimes that's warranted, right? You've done it for a really long time. It's not changing. You probably should. But if you've had success and then it's backed off, and then you've had success and then it's backed off, and it's just kind of like this. And like, you can almost like, maybe even like, hey, maybe it's not cause and effect, but this kind of sensibly to this. Like I just had a baby and I'm really stressed, and like now my body hurts, or
Right.
like I was feeling good and I deadlifted 300 pounds and then my back started hurting, right? And it's the first time I've done that in quite some time. And I picked up volume, like, and we can tie these things in like, okay, hey, understand this is normal. And how do we reframe this? And how do we make sure that we are tracking some things that aren't just the pain, like just your pain levels, that lets us know that over time, right, something is moving in the right direction so that you can stay on the course of the path if it's really what is needed at that time.
For sure. I mean, I think this definitely is something that we continue talking with. I think it's very meaningful to a lot of
Mhm.
people, but let's pause now. I think we gave a lot of things to
Yeah.
digest. So thank you, brother, for your other question. I'll have a couple for you over the next couple
Right.
weeks. So stay tuned for
I'm
those.
scared.
And Joe, we love you. Listeners, we love you. And thank you again for tuning in to another exciting episode of the Beyond Pain podcast.